Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is a cabin in a spring meadow that I just stamped out and colored primarily with alcohol-based pens and gel pens for all these little textures in here. It's a fun way to work and something different for me. Voila, there's no kind of a glossiness to this. It's all done on matte cardstock. Okay, not that this technique has to be done on the matte paper. You can also do it in glossy, but I just wanted to have a little bit of a change, and sometimes when you do those little gel pens on matte paper, it kind of rolls on there a little bit easier than gel glossy paper, but I don't know, both work out very well. I find that the saturations of this card are very good on the matte paper. And as far as the usages of certain types of processes, like adding in the little mist in the background, feels the same to me as glossy cardstock, and some of the different looks you can get, in terms of distance and diffusion of light, and how that's applied. Or it's just about the same on both cardstocks. The process feels different for sure, in that matte cardstock tends to absorb, your ink much faster, but I don't know, overall, it's not too much difference. You just have to kind of adjust your touch a little bit and technique, and I don't know, all's pretty good in the world of papers and processes with similar media. So had a lot of fun with this one. A lot of layers of texture for sure, but it got a little bit too busy at one point in time, but you add that little pigment down there and it kind of brings it all together. It's my kind of a, I don't know, backup, savior, whatever. So, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the scene and the process here. Okay, let's try a little experiment here. I'm going to probably not use my stylus tools and my die-based inks, but I'm saying that now, but we'll see what happens here. This scene is going to be attempted on a non-glossy. This is the glossy side, and you can see this is the flat side. This is a coated single-side piece of paper, and I just happen to have a lot of these already pre-cut, so it's just convenient for me to use just the back side of this. But if this comes out okay, then I would recommend just some kind of decent cardstock. It doesn't have to be the back side of a glossy cardstock at all. I just happen to be using it at a convenience, and I want to use my markers and my gel pens, but like I said, I don't like to limit myself, but in terms of a technique type of thing, I'm finding that the the pens and the gel pens can go quite far, and I don't know, it just becomes another kind of technique for us to kind of play around with, go for a little bit of variety, and it's kind of fun to, test things out and see how it goes. Now, this isn't the first scene or video that I've done in this manner, but a lot of it has been a lot of trial, maybe a little error, but not so much so. I mean, there are things you can do with any kind of technique to, kind of make a, acceptable looking scene. And I'm kind of discovering some of those different techniques using different processes, and by no means do I think I'm breaking new ground. I'm sure other people have done a lot of similar techniques, whatever I happen to kind of arrive at in these videos, but I'm just saying that they're kind of new for me in many ways. But when I'm doing these types of things and experiments, a lot of it is I'm just kind of following a real similar process, but I'm just using a different medium, so it should have a different looking result, but in terms of the concept and the process, it's all kind of the same. All right, let's see, which way should I do this one? Should I do this one on the vertical? Maybe I'll do it vertical. Okay, I'm kind of aiming the cabin kind of in the center, so I have this, I'm not stamping from that part on or off the page. When I'm doing matte cardstock, I probably put a little bit more pressure on things than the glossy, but on both, it's a good idea to get good pressure overall. All right, so you can see right away it is a lighter impression because we don't have that ink sitting so much on the surface of the paper, okay? So it's going to be a lighter look overall. Okay, that being said, it's going to look different on different types of papers. You can get a coated non-glossy too, coated matte, and it'll take the color a little bit differently, but we'll just start off with this. On this scene, I think I'm going to stamp everything out and then just kind of like a coloring book, I'm going to fill it in. So, well, let me see, that's black. Maybe I'll go with a dark green. So I'm kind of approaching things a little bit differently. In terms of my coloring, I want a lot of coloring to be inherent in the impressions themselves, okay? I will fill in with some additional tone too, but let's get a lot of that tone just within the green. So what I'm saying is, in some instances, on glossy, maybe I would stamp out this grass in black, and then I would just utilize the inking process with the things like the stylus tools to bring in my color. Alright, this one's the 3 rocks and grass. Oops. So even if you drop a rock in the middle of your scene, it doesn't really matter. This is the sedge filler stamp, and I'm filling in with that. Okay. I stamped those rocks in the black ink, and I will stamp my grasses in green. Okay. Light pressure, center pressuring. Okay, I'm not rocking that grass like this, okay? Getting harsh edges, like that, okay? It should fill in nicely, nice and seamlessly. I just throw in those rocks just for a little bit of a kind of textural variation. And then let's get a little bit of a foreground going. How about with we'll stamp out a little fence here. Go about like so. How about we'll make an opening. This is one of those things when you kind of stamp it on the left and right hand side, we create this little opening here, which is kind of what one of these things I call a lead-in. Okay, and there's a video out there on that concept. Something to kind of lead in the viewer in terms of the direction, movement of the scene. Alright, this is just some reeds that I'm stamping in the foreground. I could stamp it within the scene as well. Let's just grab our mask like so. Okay. Put some grass at the base of the fence, which there already is, but I'm just adding a little bit extra. Okay, something like that. So it's a decent composition. Okay. Alright, now let's take a look at this. We'll put some green grasses down here, and maybe some browns in the cabin. And, okay, now what I was talking about, as far as the processes go, this is going to be a different technique, different medium, for the most part. And I am going to kind of work it in the same process that I do with dye-based inks. So in other words, I'm going to start with light tones and work incrementally darker, okay? So let's go for something like this. I have a nice range of brown tones, this one being the lightest, and working from light to dark. Be something like this, okay? Take a look at the cabin here. And just in general, we'll take a look at this cabin and we'll think about it in terms of it being a three-dimensional object. Okay, now I can look at the design in the print or on the, this one's the wood version, but you can see it's darker underneath the eaves here, or the kind of the porch overhang. You can see there's little shaded areas under here, underneath that eave up there. So, just in general, I want that, the roof to be a little bit lighter than the sides, okay, the vertical edge. Just like this wood here, this wood is darker up here and lighter on top because it's being top lit. And we'll think about this in terms of a three-dimensional object. Here's 1, 2, 3 spaces within that object, and I'll make the sides a little bit darker, or this side will be darker, that side will be a little bit lighter, with this being the lightest. And when you have a different treatment of a three-dimensional object that way, in terms of values, it'll look more dimensional. Sometimes people see this like a cabin or a structure, and they see it as one unit to be colored in, so they color in the whole thing the exact same. And then it flattens it out because there's no variation in terms of the different sides of it, okay? So you can see it, instead of seeing this as one whole space, an outline to be colored in the same way, think about it in terms of 1, 2, 3 spaces. And then within those spaces you can create some variation too, but just in general we'll start that way. Okay, this is a very light tone, so what you can do is I can go over the whole thing. Now this makes it easier, okay, too. Okay, so I'm just going over the whole thing, like so. Okay, I'm even putting it on the roof. Okay, now these are alcohol markers again. Alright, now, just for a little bit of variation, too, down in this grass, I don't like, I tend to not like just all green being brought down into my grassy areas. I think it looks too artificial. Okay, now my ink is a little bit wet right now, so I'm picking up some of the ink and streaking it with this alcohol pen, even though alcohol and water-based pen shouldn't mix, but just that my ink is a little bit wet on my page still. It's picking some of it up, but that being said, that's fine if it does that, because you want it to blend anyway. I mean, I could wait for this to dry a little bit, but I'm not going to do that. Alright, so we have that all done. Like so, okay. Now I know I colored this whole thing, but as I get darker, what I'll do is I'll kind of stay away from some areas, okay? Test the pen out. This one's going to be a little bit darker yet, okay. Alright, but that looks kind of weird as is, so what we'll do is we'll bring some of this into the other areas. I'm not to my darkest of tones yet, so I don't need to be too no, I don't know what, gingerly. I don't have to be too conservative with it, okay? I can go over pretty much the whole thing. All right, but see, my rooftop's still a little bit lighter. I think this is a little bit too dark to bring down in this green at this point in time, so I'll just leave that as is. Okay, so we've gone through 2 of the tones. All right, these 2, and we're now on, I don't know. All right, there we go. This one is a little bit lighter than this one. This is a biscuit color, and this one's sepia. Okay, let's see what these ones look like. That's pretty light. Biscuit is. Did I use the right one? Well, let's give it a try. I think maybe I already used this one. Boy, that's really light. Might be no, I don't know. Okay, might be a little bit different. It seems a little bit warmer than that first one that I used, but I'm not sure. Well, either way. Okay, I'm looking at my pens now, seeing if I have anything lighter than this. I don't, so let's just use this one. Okay, this is the sepia. Adding this to some of the darkest areas of the cabin. Kind of looks weird right now, I don't know, to you, just in terms of the overall. And that's because, you know, I'm treating this cabin very differently than how the other parts of the scene exist at this time. It's getting a little bit more fleshed in, but it's not being matched with the rest of the scene. But I haven't started on the rest of the scene, so I've got a long ways to go. Okay, now I've created a little bit of continuity between cabin and ground down here, okay, with the use of that little bit of brown tones down here in the grass. But here's this light green. Now, let me just pick out a bunch of the green tones that I'll probably use in this scene. I don't know if I'll use all of them that I'm picking out right here, but I have quite a few. We can go with something like this. This is a real kind of bluish green, but we'll go with a range of tones about like so. I always kind of grab all my pens and make it a visual process as opposed to a kind of a theoretical process in terms of, you know, will this go with this, you know? Kind of grab my pens and just kind of line them up. Alright, so going back to that aspect of continuity, I'm going to bring some of this green into the cabin, okay? It's not going to make the cabin look real greenish, but it'll give it a little bit of a relationship with the grass, okay? Just so it doesn't look so separate from its surrounding areas. I want it to become a part of the scenery. Okay, now the grass, just like the cabin, I want to treat this in a varied way, okay? So, I want there to be some variation. I don't want to just treat this whole area just as one value of green, okay? So, we'll make some of it lighter, some of it darker. I'm kind of going off of the grass forms in here right now, okay? So where there's kind of these little tufts on here, okay, I'm just going in and kind of reiterating some of it down here on the page where those forms are, okay? So I'm just kind of defining some of the shadows a little bit more, but I do want to leave kind of some areas. I'll probably go in the middle, a little bit lighter. If it's a little bit darker on the edge, it's just like I do with the sponging of colors. I create a little bit of a vignette. And like at the base of certain things, like these fences down here, I'll just add some of this tone down here just to create a little bit more of a shadow. You know, that their fence is casting around the base of the cabin. I'll kind of color in to make it look like it has weight and opacity and I want it to kind of sit within the scene. Alright, now some of these areas up here on my tree. Let's go with some of this light green. Just kind of flesh that in a little bit more. This is a very light green, like that. So you can kind of do it this way, and not have it kind of stand out in terms of a kind of an awkward form within in there. Use a little streak of this on the rooftop now that there's some green tree over the top of it. Okay. So okay, now let's try this one. Pretty warm in terms of green. And I might want to use it a little bit sparingly. Ooh, that's really green. Kind of hit my shadows with it a little bit. I don't usually want something so hot green, in there. But I'm using it as kind of like a foundation, to build colors on. I can hit some little areas up in my tree, maybe. But it's too bright that way. So, just like I do with switching off to another one, spearmint, okay? And I'll kind of blend it in a little bit, knock it down a touch, just so it isn't so hot green, or a hot color of any type, okay? I'll just kind of go into it again, and kind of change the intensity a little bit. Now, it hasn't changed too much, but, I have a couple more greens to come, a couple more values of green. Okay, I can put some more of this into my cabin. Switching up, this one looks like a elm green, E-L-M. Okay, looks like kind of like a bit of an olive green. This one's a little bit warm too, so I'm gonna be careful not to use too much of that. Alright, now I'm no marker expert or anything, so as far as my usage goes, it's going to be a little bit rough. I use these pens, but I don't use them. I kind of use them more as a kind of little embellishments on my scenes, okay? Going a little bit darker, my shadow areas. Alright, kind of harsh right now, so let's go back to the lightest one and kind of blend some of that in a little bit more, okay? It's not moving the ink, so I'm just kind of toning it down a touch and trying to blend it out a little bit, okay? Now this is not, certain types of paper where you can kind of move inks around on it, in terms of alcohol inks, because this ink is soaking in, but I'm just kind of adding a little bit more of it, okay? To kind of semi-blend it together. Okay, still working on it though. It's looking a little harsh right now. But remember, this is kind of a foundation for the gel pens in concept, so we'll see where it goes. Okay, starting to look kind of dark on me so far, but like I said, still kind of working it. Now this is where I said, well, maybe I won't do kind of my stylus tool touches, but for up in the sky, I think I do want some of that stylus tool touch or influence in terms of a certain type of texture I'm going for. In terms of I want it to be a nice soft texture, so that being said, let's grab some light blue. I'll try the Memento Summer Sky. And I just want to get a little bit of tone up there, okay? And that has a very, very different feel than going on glossy cardstock. But just to show you that you can, blend some tones into your scenes. No matter what cardstock you have, or paper or surface, this is a prime example because it's very, very, I don't know what the word would be. It's, absorbent, I guess, just in general. It's really absorbing my ink. If you have a re-inker, let's go with that. This is a bit of Aqua Adirondack Lights. I need a lot more ink in here. So just using some re-inker fluid like that, and that should give me a pretty loaded sponge tip here. Good. That's what I want. I want it to apply kind of in a faster method and a much smoother one. It's smoother because of how much ink is in here, so it kind of gives me a bit more of a drag. In this case, it's like turning this into like a big watercolor pen, okay? Because I really inked that up, and it's just, I'm like going on here with a tip, except a pen is probably much more of a narrow tip than, an oval sponge like this. Okay? Alright. So that kind of matches up the sky a little bit more. Let's try a little bit of a darker color. This is the Bahama Blue. Okay? Just to go for a little bit more variation in the sky. Alright. I'm cheating. I'm using this. Hey. Just for a little bit, though. Okay, so I left a little bit of light back there in the horizon. Or, I don't know, it's not really the horizon, it's kind of just in the back. Maybe a little bit on the horizon over here. Alright. So we have our cabin and ground. It's looking a little weird in here with that really super bright tone of grass. But let's see what we can do now. Let's build on some additional touches here. I'm going for my gigantic set of, let me see if I can get this over here, Shuttle Art gel pens, okay? $26. 180 different colors and in all types. Okay, so what I'm looking for right now, I'm not looking for like glitter ones. I think these are my glitter ones over here, but here's some green. That one's glitter. There's a whole lot of glitter pens in this set. A couple different shades of green. Really bright though. Okay, here we go. This one's a darker green. And let's see if we have some just general brown without it being like a glitter brown. The glitter ones have like a little speckles in the on the barrel. Love it, but love the glitter, but that's not what I'm looking for right now in terms of how this seems kind of targeted to go. Alright, let's see what we can do with these here. Let's see if I can create some different types of variation within my grasses, okay? I find these pens to be a little bit more translucent than, say, opaque. Now this is a, I don't know, like a 60% probably green, 0 being white, and 100% being black. This is like a 60, I would say. And what I'm doing is, on these grasses, is I'm kind of building up a little bit of texture. right now I'm being kind of conservative with it because I'm doing these textures kind of on a background that's darker or about the same value as this green, so it doesn't really show up too much. But I'm just kind of getting the feel of it right now. Adding it in. This is kind of like one of those things, it's, if you kind of want to just, do a little coloring, it's kind of fun, the advent of, or the popularity and widespread use of coloring books by adults has really given us a lot of potential media for rubber stamping. Like I said, that gigantic set of gel pens would never have been developed if it wasn't for the coloring book fad. And I hope it's around for a long time because there was a lot of things like gel pens and alcohol pens out there for us to utilize at a really, really inexpensive price. So, okay, that's the dark green. Let's go to a lighter green like this. So I guess I kind of work from light to dark when I colored, and I'm working from dark to light as I highlight and embellish with these. Not that it has to be, but I'm just thinking out loud. That seems to be what I'm doing here in terms of my process. Alright, this is a fairly light green, and it's not showing up too much over this. I'm not sure if it's even applying. So I keep giving it a little scribble. Maybe it's too translucent, okay? It's not really showing up too much as I would like. So let's switch off to my next tone. These pens are really good for certain applications, but for certain applications they're a little bit too translucent. You can't really see it, so I think I'm not seeing it over my darker areas. I think it's because they're so wet right now too with that alcohol ink. Kind of adding little touches to these tufts. And I think I'm going to have to switch out. Now, one of the things you could do is, if you want to, you can kind of heat set this. As a matter of fact, I now have a heat gun set up here. Maybe I'll dry this off a touch. It wouldn't hurt. Okay. I'll dry it from the back side a little bit too. Okay, let's see if that was sufficient. I would think it is, but let's see if that changes the surface a little bit in terms of how it's accepting the ink. Yeah, a little bit better, but it's very, very translucent still, so it's not really picking up what I'm doing on here, except in my lighter areas where I didn't apply too much ink. So this will be kind of just a very subtle background texture in terms of the background, in terms of the grass buildup that I do here. Okay, so these are good for certain things, but maybe not for the most kind of darker areas. It's a little bit too translucent. Okay, now let's go into this cabin. I'm going to, I think, utilize this pen. It's brown. And I'll go in, I'll just add some little touches in here just to make it look a little bit more aged. It's very, very subtle. I mean, I can see it kind of adding to that wood grain. I can put some of it on the rooftop here. Kind of going along with those lines and the kind of the boards of the cabin. Okay, like that. Okay, let's see what we have here. Kind of a tan. Get that one flowing. Some of these pens, this is the first time I've used them, so... Okay, that one's coming out. It's a little bit translucent, or quite a bit translucent. Going and adding this into my cabin forms. Let's get some of the posts. Highlight those, bring out a little bit more dimension to it. You can see that, where those are. Maybe some of these window, kind of the molding around these windows can get a little bit accentuated. I have no idea what the color of colors of these pens are. They're not coded as far as that goes. They're not even numbered. It's you know, it's too inexpensive a set for any type of kind of identifying marks on it. So I have no complaints, though, not at that price point. Okay, so adding some more of this into my wood makes it look a little bit more rustic. Okay, a little continuity down here. You can bring some different forms into your grassy area. Alright, I need to pull out the heavy artillery, so to speak, as far as it comes to media, and gel pens in particular. And I need to go to my go-tos, which are the Uniball Signo pens, okay? Not all of these are Uniball Signo, or are they? Maybe they are. Alright. Not nearly as many colors as that 180 pen set, but these ones are going to be a little bit more, yeah, opaque, so completely different price point. Not super expensive. I bought mine on a set, but I can go in and I can actually see my forms that I'm adding with this pen here, though. Much more so than the other ones. But I like the other ones as far as the usage goes for what it's good for. And it gives me some variety. Alright, now I'm just adding these little tufts of grass in here, kind of bringing out, I don't know, or creating kind of different textures. It's looking very textural. You can see all these kind of crazy marks everywhere. Okay, alright. One of my Signo white ones, I think, was not working at the convention that I was at this weekend. Let's see if I can get it going. You just kind of give it a good whack sometime and it'll start flowing again for you. This is a 0.7. That doesn't seem to be going. So let's go to my, well, here's another 0.7. This one's newer. And this one's working fine. You can go to a thicker one, like a 1.0, and it, I don't know, with the 1.0s I haven't had any kind of clogging with them before. So those ones are good for that. But sometimes you want kind of a thinner line, you know, like this one can provide. Okay, I'm kind of just building up some additional forms from in the lighter areas of these little tufts of grass. I wonder if well, look, I'm going to highlight some of this fence post here, okay, and barbed wire. See if it can make the these posts look a little bit more dimensional by adding that little bit of highlighting to it, like so. Okay, so you can see the difference here between these posts and these ones over here. See on the left side of these fence posts, I put the lighting on that side of it. Maybe we'll keep in with that lighting scheme, and I'll stick with the kind of that left-hand side lighting, like the light is coming from that direction. Okay, put a little highlight on my barbed wire. Okay. You can do the same thing with some of this tree. It's capturing some light. Kind of going along with the trunks, kind of creating these other little branches throughout the tree, just for some added dimension. Okay. All right. Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's say that there's the springtime and there's kind of poppies in the meadow. Going in and adding these kind of little highlights. No, they're not highlights. They're supposed to be little flowers. This is what I like to do. I like to kind of go in and cluster them together. Like so. It kind of becomes its own kind of texture hovering over the surface of the scene. Okay, see on that side. It's kind of groupings of a texture. As I draw them in, I notice that when it's wet, it's a little bit more opaque, but as it dries or maybe soaks into the paper, which is probably the difference between glossy and matte, it's changing its value, so it's becoming darker. I can't see it when it dries, but I have plans for that to make this look a little bit more dimensional, or try to. And we'll see how that goes. What when I'm done with this orange one. I'm kind of trying to change some of the size of these flowers as well. I guess it's the size of, I'm kind of making these little ovals, so I'm making the sizes of ovals different. Something like that. Alright, now those are kind of disappearing to some extent, so let me see what I can do about that. Let me try to go to a Sharpie Peach colored paint pen. So it's a water-based paint pen. These types you're gonna have to shake up. Alright, there we go. Hear that? That's this little ball that kind of came loose as I did that on the inside. This really helps to mix up that inner paint in there really well. I wish there was an expensive set of 180 colors of this one. That would be pretty interesting. Okay. Get that paint off that side. And let's go for some multiple two-toned flowers where they're reflecting kind of a different, reflecting in different values, I guess. So I'm kind of going over parts of, some of those first dots that I laid down, which might seem kind of like tedium, but for me, I really love adding in these little details, so this isn't really some kind of a tedious exercise. I just put a little bit of dot on the flowers that I laid down before. And I think this will read very nicely. There's this the California Poppy Reserve that it's pretty interesting out here in California. I believe it's in Antelope Valley. Not too far from Los Angeles area. Pretty spectacular fields and, of whatever billions of California poppies growing. Really quite spectacular. And one of the things about California poppies, where there's poppies, sometimes you find, oh, I don't know, different types of flowers. Some pearly everlasting, which would be these little white ones. We'll cluster those ones, little patches of it here and there, to kind of break up the the California poppies were laid down to break up the monotony of the green. Okay. Now we're laying down some of these little white flowers to break up the monotony of the orange. Okay. Now this is the 1.0 Uniball Signo pen. I've always had really good luck with these ones. Pearly everlastings are kind of smaller than the poppies, so I'm probably making most of these little dots a little bit smaller. I really do like the wildflower seasons. Out in the desert or wherever. I guess because it means a couple different things. Out in California, Southern California, we don't really, when it gets warm, I don't think, it's not something as, special to us as, certainly in other parts of the world or country. And, but what it means to us in Southern California is it's a good thing that we got some rain. It's always kind of in drought conditions. Unless we get lucky and have a good watery, good wet spring. Alright, this is starting to come to life. I'm finding this is really about the gel pen more than anything. This kind of little coloring, it's kind of fun. Alright, now where you find California poppies and different types of colors, you often find lupin, okay? It's a good, harmony of purple, orange, and white. And we never want those kind of raging wildfires out here, but, a lot of the types of foliage out here in, many areas, it's meant to burn off. Certain ones aren't type to burn off, but they're so filled with oils. I guess essential oils or whatever. Those types of areas burn off, be it naturally or whatever. And anyways, you get this huge explosion of wildflowers in those areas, so that's probably what's going to happen in those areas that kind of where those fires were in California this winter. It's like renewal. Okay, so this is a little bit of harmony in here in terms of that purplish tone down here. See it all in here? Here, here. So I'm kind of clustering it. You know, it looks better to cluster it. See that orange cluster, little white cluster, purple. I mean, they're all kind of intertwined in some areas, but that's what you see, you know. A lot of times they're just clusters of certain types of colors together, and that looks better than just kind of all completely equally interspersed everywhere, you know, like a blanket of multicolored things. It's kind of that, but, you know, when you look closer, it's kind of all, there's groupings of those types of color combinations. And you can do it, kind of focus it around what you see in your area, you know, certain types of indigenous flora, spring flora. Alright, so we have something like that. So, quite a spring explosion of color. Alright, now we have this pen right here. This kind of relates to the cabin, right? So, let's go in there and, you know, add a few little details maybe. Bring some of that tone up into the cabin somewhere. Kind of going along with some of that wood grain. I don't know, it makes it a little bit more related, again, to kind of to its surroundings. You know, put a little highlight. We'll do a brown highlight. I did white on there, but kind of this color looks pretty good in there too, as far as lighting goes. Kind of using these paint pens and gel pens at some point in time after I add, you know, quite a bit of it, I almost feel like I'm painting, you know. In terms of the process. Alright. A little bit to a tree, perhaps. Maybe not too much. I think I have a quote for this in the Scenic Sentiments. I don't have room for it in here unless I kind of add it kind of separately on a frame or something like that, or on a mat. But okay. Kind of interesting. Let me add a little bit more tone. Can't remember what tip I was using. Yeah, it's got to be this one that's kind of wet still. I want to just kind of create a little bit of a stronger vignette on the upper area because it's so heavy with texture down below. I kind of want to maybe match it. Maybe that's not the right word, but kind of bring it a little bit closer together. Okay, see that up there? I'm kind of, that heavy use of blue is kind of, you know, balancing the bottom heaviness of everything that's going on down here. Little striations in the sky. bring in a little of that color in here. Kind of match things a little bit. Okay, and Danube blue. I had a feeling I might not be able to stay away from this altogether, but there's very little kind of sponging in kind of the lower area. I don't think I did. Did I use any of that on the cabin at all? I don't think I did. Okay, that's kind of anchoring things down a little bit more. A little bit of sponging on there, yeah. Okay. Should I? Let's use a little bit of black up in that sky. Just to kind of cap things off a little bit more. Alright. I kind of sealed things off at the top a little bit. And I'll do that a little bit down here as well. Just that little black kind of like I said, it kind of anchors things a little bit more, doesn't it? Maybe that darkened in a little bit too much, but let's go back in and bring some things back out again. I'll go to my lavender paint pen and just add a little bit of that lupin back in. So some are darker, some are lighter, because I colored across some of them, so you can do multiple layering and layers like that. So doing the same with that orange, just making some of those orange little flower shapes pop a little bit more, because I ran a little tone over them to create a little bit of shading. Just going back in and doing my little tweaks. Alright. Trying to decide if I want anything else in here. Perhaps a stronger foreground, maybe. I'm trying to see. Let's see here. Worm's eye view. Maybe not. Let me look for my... well, here it is. I want a stronger foreground in here, and I can still do that. If I use, this is what I'm looking for right here, this VersaFine black. But before I do that, I need to do my favorite hobby, misting. I was looking at that. It's kind of a similar texture in here with all that crazy floral creations. Let's grab a cotton swab and get quite a bit of this color box frost white. And let's see if I can't add that little bit of dimension in here. Kind of going in the background and kind of where there's white against something dark, I'm just kind of softening up that darkness. And it makes it look like more of a glowing light. Okay, and how about down in this meadow down here, we'll add a little bit of a kind of a misty fog that's kind of hovering along some of the parts of the grass. Kind of potentially make things a little bit more kind of dreamy. And by doing this, you're kind of creating light too. So let's see. Let's grab a paper towel like this and add a little bank of fog and mist in the meadow. Let's say this area is like early morning in this location, wherever it might be. I don't even know if I need this mask. Now, I need to be a little bit more careful because this pigment wipes right off on glossy cardstock if I don't like it. But on matte, it kind of tends to, stick a little bit more, so I don't want to add what I don't really want, so yeah, being a touch more definitive, probably. I'd say that it's kind of adding what I'm, hoped it would do. It's kind of subduing some of that real busyness of all those textures. And I know it's just adding that other dimension into the scene that I really like. Now this area in here is really dark. And I'm going to try and add a little layer of mist at the base of that cabin. Yeah. Like so, just to kind of break up that kind of monotonous value that's in there, okay? Add some of the back here as well. It's like really like dry brushing it in there, see? There's that mist down there. It's a little bit more magical of a location. See this down here at the base of the fence, how that looks? If you like it, maybe add a little bit more. Kind of creates this little diffused kind of entry point. My lead-in into the scene. kind of making the lighting coming, coming in from back there. Okay. Hero Hues Unicorn. The white. Quite opaque, so whiter than, or more opaque than the color box one, so you have to kind of be a little bit more careful about your application of it, just because it stands out so much more than the other one. Still want to take it in a nice kind of dry brushing touch. Okay. Something like that. Changes the spirit of it completely. And I think that was just what it needed. But let's go to the VersaFine. Onyx Black. Thick ink. And we'll go with our taller reed stamp here. And let's add in a little bit of a stronger kind of lead-in foliage and just overall foreground element. Okay. Alright, kind of like so. I might go one step further here in terms of my imagery. But I need a certain stamp for that. Let me go look for it. Okay. I want to take my foreground one step further with the use of the oak branch stamp. Okay. Apply it like so. And I'm just going to have this kind of overhanging coming from the top up here. And we'll do it again in our VersaFine Black. Okay. Come into it like this. I'm not using very much of it, just kind of a, I don't know, maybe inch and a half of the top, or I don't know, one side portion. There's not really a top and bottom to this. It's designed to be nice and universally used. You can use it for bushes coming from below, or a overhanging tree branch from the top like that. Alright, so that kind of creates a little bit more of a, I don't know, a frame around the imagery, which in this case I like. I don't know, I like it in most scenes to kind of frame things off naturally. I mean, we can do that physically with like a oval, card or something like that format. But I like to do it with imagery as well, so. Okay, so that, I've gone pretty heavy in my corners, right, with my imagery, so I'm just going to add a little bit of extra tone as an extra vignette effect to really bring kind of the viewer's attention in here. And there's my spring scene for my submission to the Stampscapes Yahoo group to Stampscapes, not Yahoo, but the Facebook group. Still caught up in that old name for the old group, whatever location. All right. So let's take a look at that and assess if anything else needs to be done. I think that's about it. You can see how heavily textured that is. You can see some greens in there and everything. You can see that wood. It's almost like a rainbow of color in there. Maybe it's too much, I don't know. I don't know, that side could be a little bit darker too, but I think it looks okay. But look at all these textures in here. It's a lot of flowers. It's almost too crazy, but then you put the little mist over the top of it and all's well. The mist really has saved me in many a scene before. And I think, I don't know, to an extent on this one too, but you know, it's kind of using a lot of the same techniques. I mean, I actually did, you know, sponge in some colors, but normally I'd sponge in the whole thing. But, you know, there's a different type of look to just using markers and gel pens in there. You can certainly get a lot of texture. You can see those textures back in here with my little scratch marks with the gel pen. You can see it down here underneath the floral kind of accents. You can see it down here. It's in areas if it's light. So it's a very textural piece in this case. It doesn't have to be. It just, you know, depends on how you use your media, you know. And this certainly isn't, you know, indicative of all, you know, scenes that would be done in gel pens and alcohol pens. They're just how I happen to use it on this one, so kind of in my experiment. I don't know, there's a lot more other people, most people that use those media that would be much more in tune with their processes. I'm just kind of a beginner at this technique right here, so experimenting around, playing around, and just kind of having some fun with it. So I don't know, I love texture, and I don't know, I don't really feel that there's a whole lot of difference, you know, between using the matte paper and the glossy in terms of the application process. Okay, and this by no means is a really great, you know, matte paper, because it's just the back side of a, you know, a coated glossy paper, so should work with any type of papers. The keys for me is really using those gel pens and paint pens within all of the given areas to give them continuity. Otherwise, you know, in doing something like this in this style, there's a real chance that, you know, the cabin wouldn't look kind of related to the rest of the scene, and you'd have this area down here which wouldn't seem related to that area, the sky. But if you kind of bring some of those colors down in here, you know, that blue or some of the browns into here and some of the greens into here, blues in here as well, everything kind of comes together. It doesn't have to be a real strong kind of relationship between all of these different areas having common colors, but just having a subtle little addition, and it can come together a little bit more for you. Anyway, okay, so spring cabins. Cabin. Done on matte paper, primarily with the usage of the alcohol pens and the gel pens, and I guess the paint pens as well. A lot of pens these days, so experimenting around with that. And we'll have to think about some kind of color to mat this off with. Anyway, if you've sat and watched this, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy those little flowers and all the textures in this scene. Thanks for watching.